Hello, welcome back to the Ayurveda and Women's Health Podcast, An Evolution to Your Higher Self. That's it. This show is all about how we can cultivate ancient wisdom and meet us with that beautiful wisdom in today's modern womanhood. I am your host, Harmony, and today I am joined by the one and only Anna, who is a dear friend of mine. She's also a high performance coach, and we love having these deep conversations that are resonating with so many women out there. When we did our last conversation about friendship in your 40s, the heartbreak of it, the truth of it, the beauty of it too, we both got so much positive feedback and so many people messaging us saying, hey, I really resonated with that episode. It was really good. People aren't speaking about this. I felt really heard. I felt really seen. And that's exactly what we wanted. We just want to have conversations amongst ourselves, like things that we speak about, and include all of you guys. So now I should just, in my intro, say, hey besties, it's your besties Anna and Harmony. Rip out with us. So today's conversation is going to be similar, and it is one that I do think that so many women will deeply resonate with, even if it's something we've been conditioned not to talk about openly. But hey, we're all open sisters here. So we're going to do it, and we're going to be talking about female rage and the pressure women feel to always be nice, emotionally regulated, accommodating, nurturing, agreeable. And what happens when years of emotional suppression, hormonal fluctuations, perimenopause, overstimulation, people-pleasing, and invisible labor finally reach breaking point? Because I think many women are carrying anger they don't even realize that they're carrying. And rage, it can be unheard. Rage, it can be constantly shape-shifting to make everyone else feel comfortable. It doesn't always look like what we think rage looks like. And often, especially during, our big transitional periods in life, like perimenopause, those emotions become harder to suppress. So they bubble to the surface, and that's what we want to unpack. And we want to unpack the shame around this female rage and anger and all of the things that come with that. So today we're going to have a really honest conversation. It's going to be real, reflective, and possibly a little bit activating, but in the best way possible. So I will shut up and welcome Anna back to the podcast. So welcome, Anna.
Kia ora. It's really good to be here. It's like my best part of my Monday. So I'm looking forward to this one. It's one that I think lots of people are going to resonate with. Again, the topics that we're choosing are front and foremost for women of our sort of age. So looking forward to getting stuck in.
Yeah,
let's go, baby.
Let's go, baby. Okay, I'm going to throw it at you. Why do you think so many women for so long have suppressed their anger instead of expressing it?
Great question. Well, I can only talk from my experience and what I've seen through friends, family, and clients. I guess the big thing is society, right? So boys beat their chest, I am man. It's okay for them to show rage. It's almost for them a badge of honor, like I look after my woman and this is how I do it. And for decades, the women have been told either directly or indirectly through society's message that we should be appeasing, calm, the people that make things better. And so therefore the messaging consciously and unconsciously has been not to rock the boat. I know for me as a child, if I was ever expressing myself, not at home, but at school or with certain people, they would just fling the word psycho. Oh, she's being a psycho. So whilst I hadn't been taught how to necessarily harness these big emotions, which could have been helpful, when I did express how I was feeling and it came out in a way that was perceived as angry, I got labeled a psycho. And I know many, many people of my generation, it was that sort of word. So very quickly you realize that actually I can't behave in that way. And so therefore I will feel the emotions, I'll feel it coming up. But instead of being able to articulate myself or learn how to communicate or be taught techniques on how to deal with those natural, normal emotions, just push them down, push them down, push them down. And then all of a sudden it comes out in people pleasing, doing things that we don't want to do, having no boundaries, anxiety. I mean, the suppressed rage in women is coming out and bleeding into our communities. And I think you get to an age, in my case, it was that 45,
What, 2 years ago? You held on to it for a while.
did. And then the gloves have come off, and I'm like, hold on a minute. This things that I perceived were okay were no longer okay. And I think it dawned on me probably, yeah, about that sort of age, maybe a little bit older. My daughter said to me, "Hey, mum, you know you don't have to like everyone, don't you?" And I thought, that's
Excellent.
a novel
Can
experience.
go away. You.
But yeah, I honestly had often tried to justify arseholes behavior, justify why people might act in a way. And whilst that's lovely, it also took away, now on reflections, has taken away my ability to read arseholes and to know what to do when they present themselves. And so I made it a me problem rather than a them problem. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such an important point that a lot of the time as women, we do make it a me problem. Like, how do we get people to like us and accept us? Oh, they think badly or they said badly of us, or instead of actually, it's actually a you problem and you're the like ass.
Yeah.
And I think you've really touched on sort of that good girl programming that we have had through the conditioning through childhood. And I also feel that women suppress anger a lot because of those traditional roles that were put upon us. And we have that fear of rejection and fear of conflict because we haven't been taught how to deal with conflict in a really healthy way and stand up for ourselves. But also because women have been rewarded for self-sacrifice. It's like the more that you sacrifice yourself as a mother and do all the things for your children instead of putting yourself or your career forward, all the things that you do for your partner or your husband, even in friendships, like when you are someone who self-serves and self-sacrifices a lot, you are rewarded. Oh, they're so lovely. They're so nice, and then we want to be known as nice and lovely and wonderful. And we are, but sometimes it comes to our detriment. So I would love to ask as well, what do you think it is? I mean, there's going to be many reasons why, but what do you think it is that is making women angry and feel this sense of rage? What are some of those contributing underlying causes of this feminine rage?
This feminine rage that sits within us. Well, I think every human wants to feel like they have a choice. Every human wants to feel like they have got some autonomy over their lives. And, when you're constantly perceiving that you have no choice or that people are telling you what to do or behave in a certain way or this is how we do it on the pro circuit and these are the things that we have to do in order to get on in our career, and let's not talk about this in front of that person because that person might get upset. Okay, all right, well, what about me? I think once the kind of the parts of us that feel that we can control erode, there gets to a point where there is no more. So actually the things that potentially we get angry about, people are looking at us and going, well, why would they get angry about that? But it's just been years and years of build up of suppressing our own needs. So we want to be looking at how can we build autonomy in our lives and how can we tap into our intuition and guide us from that place of intuition rather than logical people pleasing. I've got a brilliant example, and it's a shameful example of when the fight, flight, freeze fawn came into my world a couple of years ago when my daughter would have been about 12. And we were in a situation where a man who was in his sort of 70s in a retirement village grabbed hold of my daughter and was holding her sort of from here, from behind. So he was wedged up
Like
to
a
her back.
chokehold.
Yeah, yeah, but in a fun way. But he was like, "You're going to be my wife one day," and he was leading her down the corridor, and she was looking at me. Her eyes were popping out of her head. And I was kind of going, and let it happen. And it was probably, I don't know, 20 meters that he walked her, maybe just less, then moved her into the doorway of his home. And then his partner opened the door and was quite shocked to see his partner with my daughter. And I kind of made my excuses and was like, okay, gotta go. Now, in that moment, as a mother, I would like to think that I go, get the fuck off my daughter. What do you think you're doing? But in that moment, all of the people pleasing and the fawning took over my body. So I was literally frozen in time because I didn't want to be perceiving it wrong. I didn't want to be making too much of a big deal over it. I didn't want to stir up any trouble for my mum who lives in the retirement village. I didn't want to freak Sienna out. So there were all these things that actually were going against my complete instinct, which was to punch him in the face and get my daughter and run away from her.
Yeah.
And we've since spoken about, or we spoke about it that evening, and then, actually did take some steps. But the reality is that we are passing those sorts of fawning onto the next generation unless we have the courage to be able to step up and go, hey, hold on a minute, this is my boundary, and that's not okay for you to be holding my daughter so close or whatever. And I think for me, the people pleasing thing is a huge correlation between the two.
Yeah.
So we have to be trusting our instinct. We have to be listening to our head. And in my case, my head was going, I don't want to upset the apple cart because my mum has to still live with that. However, bringing head and heart together and doing things that are congruent and actually safe is the
And
important thing.
And then probably somewhere in our subconscious, or those samskaras that we create from an Ayurvedic psychology perspective, is the thoughts and the memories of when I have spoken up before, it's seen as, a woman whinging or a woman's rage is unhealthy, and, all of those sort of things that we get labeled with, like you said, psycho. I mean, a prime example of this is the term hysterectomy. When you get your uterus taken out, that first came about because that was the treatment for women who were deemed hysterical. So the word hysterectomy comes from women being quote unquote hysterical. So doctors thought that it came from, their hormones, their uterus. So they would just rip out their uterus to try to treat this hysteria in women, which, like, when you look back at the texts and what was actually going on was perimenopause, it was hormonal changes, PMDD, all of these things we now know can contribute to that feeling of sort of unsettled behavior and emotions. But that's where the word hysterectomy comes from, hysteria. And so women are always sort of like put back in their box if they speak up, speak out, speak too loud, that they're either being dramatic, they're lying, they're hysterical, they're psycho, they're crazy. All of these negative things for being able to really speak up and speak our truth. And we just, have been, like, over history put in our little box. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And isn't it terrifying to think that language is still being used, and to think that, again, kind of talking about this generational hand-me-down of the good girl and how much we put up with when it's celebrated for a man to stand up in a meeting room and say what he believes is true for the company's direction and the vision. For a woman to do that, she would be deemed as bossy or too assertive or has got balls.
Yes.
So therefore, it's, even when it comes to equality in the workplace on pay, men will have these, and I'm not saying that there's like this big divide between men and women, but we have to acknowledge that there really is a disparity in workplaces. And when the conversation happens, it will turn back to that 1950s housewife, get back in your box. What do you know? Well, hold on a minute. You've only been working XYZ times and you're going to be off and have the children anyway. So we have to be really mindful if we want to break these generational cords and ties as to where it comes from in the first place. And then secondary to that is actually understanding and teaching our children that all emotion is okay emotion, teaching our girls that you will feel angry. And as long as there's a way for you to be able to feel the anger and use it in a way that's helpful and meaningful and doesn't hurt the other person, then it's actually warranted. So then when they're adults, they're not being seen as dysfunctional or unreliable for 2 weeks of the month or what have you narrative is.
Yeah. And I think just going back to what you said before about, talking about the workplace differences, there's also this internalized guilt around having needs as a woman and like actually speaking what your needs are, because our needs have historically come second. Like that's the truth to a lot of species, a lot of male species, and even like our children and stuff like that. So I think there's sort of guilt around having needs, and then that's, guilt can turn into frustration and anger if there's sort of like a suppression of that. But you also started talking about teenage angst, and I do want to speak about that because it is also, whilst we're talking about rage and the healthy side of emotion and why it's suppressed, there's also an unhealthy amount of rage that has been expressed through teenagers, through young women, through even women, like, which isn't great. And I would love to have your perspective as a high performance coach, speaking about the healthy versus the unhealthy type of rage. So the difference between destructive rage and informative anger, and what that looks like, and how we can channel our anger and rage into the right direction. Because I know you've worked like with athletes and a lot of like high performing individuals. If they are in the public eye, they can't just let loose with their rage. So how do you help people channel this?
Well, I love using Ayurveda, actually, the very basics of it in terms of the elements and how it's energy moving through us. And the big thing when I'm working with clients is for them to understand themselves. So when they understand themselves, they'll understand the triggers, they'll understand the values that get triggered. So let's say, for example, integrity is one of my values, and I see somebody not working within my expectation of what integrity is, that's likely to have a trigger in me. If I don't know myself, then a reactive way of expressing that anger might be to gossip, to have a go at them, to sabotage them, to really go under the line in terms of my behavior. Whereas if I understand that integrity is a value of mine, but I also understand that people don't have the same values as me, I can then create a gap between the stimulus and my response. So the information comes in, instead of getting triggered straight away and reacting in a childish way or in a way that is unevolved, and which then will often lead to me looking like I'm the one in the wrong. You take a step back, you create that distance between the trigger and the response, and then you ask yourself, what's a more helpful way of dealing with the situation in hand? But you can only do that if, one, you know who you are as a person, and that means knowing what you value and what's important to you. And then two, being present enough to catch yourself in those moments where you are being reactive. So when I'm working with clients, I want first for them to understand themselves as a human, two, to understand the physiology and what happens when we get triggered, and for them to be able to very quickly dial themselves back, and three, to use the concepts of Ayurveda and the elements so that they can kind of see when they're leaning more towards overplaying the fire and the element of fire. Often when I'm working with people, they don't realize that it's not the guy that's cut them up in the car park, or it's the person on the sports field who happens to have who's sledged them. It's not that particular moment. It's a build up of frustration that's come to that point. So what we want to be doing is understanding and getting to know ourselves and being self-aware enough to know that we're kind of moving on to that point of friction. And if that's one thing is going to be the straw that hits the camel's back, then we know that's too little too late. So understanding themselves is really important.
Yeah, because like this conversation isn't to give every woman out there an excuse to be like, okay, well, let's go, let's get a baseball bat and let our rage out on our partner's car, or, whatever, just react and respond with rage. It's about understanding that it is part of human experience. And if we suppress it for too long, then there will be health, it will be a detriment to our health, and we won't be living in our higher self, and we won't have the tools to communicate about our feelings and our emotions to move us through that. So I think with healthy rage, we are looking at understanding how we're feeling and then putting in those boundaries, speaking up for yourself. Like, these are all ways that you can release and deal with that sort of, internal rage, we're calling it. It doesn't mean that you're going out and lashing out. Is there any other ways that you can think of as like a healthy way that we can deal with the feelings of rage?
Yeah, well, again, and I can only speak for my upbringing, I wasn't taught how to process emotions, good ones or bad ones, or, perceived good or bad. It was just something that happened. And then, I grew up in a household where it was quite normal to have shouting and for there to be miscommunications. And so I just assumed that that was normal. And then when I got together with my husband, his family were very different. And so we've got to understand that we've got these normal natural emotions. So to learn how to recognize different emotions and get quite granular with them. So rage might just be rage, but actually what's sitting underneath the anger? Is it frustration? Is it sadness? Is it grief? Is it feeling invisible? Once we can understand what is the more granular part of the rage, we can then set to work on healing those parts of us. So again, it always comes down to being self-aware. The other thing I would say is that what we see or what we believe is what we see. So if I have an expectation that I'm going to have a shit day, the likelihood is that I'm going to read the signs in my day to match my belief. And we are walking belief people. My map of the world is very different to your map of the world. So what is going to spark me up, unless I'm very conscious and self-aware and present, I'm not going to be able to catch myself before I get that baseball bat. So we've got to be very present. Often when we're in rage, we're already perceiving all the things before it's even happened. I'm sure most of the listeners have had a situation where they've sent a text message and they don't hear back from the person. And the story that they have is, well, that person isn't respecting me. They must have read it. Where are they? What are they doing? Oh my goodness, I can't believe how outrageous that they haven't replied. And by the time that person has actually replied, sorry, I ran out of battery on my phone. They've created this huge story which has elicited emotions in them, which then their behavior will show that they're not present with their children, or they're a bit snappier with that person in the car park or what have you. And it's all because they're preoccupied because somebody hasn't replied to their message. So that's them not being where their feet are at. They're not being present at all. They're creating a story to match their belief in their reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to speak about the hormonal impact on our reactions, because I know a lot of us are sitting here going, when is she going to say it? I'm feeling a lot more on edge, a lot more rage in my, 40s, going through that perimenopausal sort of phase. However, I want to tell a very shameful story about myself in the early 20s. So when I was in my early 20s, I actually went on the oral contraceptive pill. Big mistake, because that made me feel very psycho.
Yeah.
And so this is just to show how the impact our hormones can have on our stress resilience, right? And then I'll get into what's actually naturally happening in perimenopause, because when you go on the oral contraceptive pill, it is stopping your natural hormones like progesterone. That is your calming hormone. So I went on it. It stopped my calming hormone, and if people cross me at the wrong time, and this guy did. I was at the gym doing, I don't know, he was like chest press or something like that. And he was like this bikey guy, and he just annoyed me because he just thought he was so great. And I was just starting my sets. You can see he knew that I was not anywhere near finished, but he came up, oh, I want to use that machine. When are you going to be done? Are you done in a minute? Can I go between it? Like, he was just like real pushy. And I was like, not having it. Hey. And I went off at him. And then he came back with some smart ass reply. And that really triggered me. And I was like, next level. You know, you don't disrespect me, because I think it brought up all of those samskaras, all of those issues about being put in a box as a female, being spoken down to, being not respected, like the gym's a man's place and all of this kind of thing. And I just was, enraged at the way he was treating a female, because there's no way he would have done that to another man. And so with this contraceptive pill in my system, I had all of this anger, aggression, and no fear, and decided to go at him. And actually, he ended up running out of the gym, which I thought was pretty funny, because he just was like, I'm not dealing with this chick. And he went out of the gym. And I absolutely wanted to chase him with a tow bar. Like, that's how furious I felt. And then the next time he came in and he saw me speaking to one of the guys that I knew, and he was like, that chick is psycho. And I told the guy I was speaking to about what happened. I was kind of laughing at it at the stage, because clearly the pill had done his thing. And he went up to him and said, yeah, there's nothing like a woman's fury. And again, it's just what we had spoken about, like if a man had sort of spoke up and been like, nah, man, he would have backed straight down and it wouldn't have been any issue. But because I spoke up and voiced, like, no, you're not coming on this machine and don't speak to me like that, and really stood up for myself, then there was a conversation about, you never get in the way of a woman's fury, and sort of like this big joke about it. Anyway, that is all to say that, yeah, sometimes hormonal shifts and changes can make us respond and react and make us feel like not ourselves. And this is very real in this perimenopausal shift for a lot of women. So this perimenopausal rage, so to speak, it's not just simply women overreacting or becoming emotionally unstable. There's a significant neuroendocrine, inflammatory, and nervous system change occurring during this transition that can dramatically affect mood regulation, emotional tolerance, and stress resilience. Do you agree there? And I will.
Oh, I do. Firstly, I'm just laughing at the fact that little Harmony sticking up for herself with this big gym guy. What I would have done to be a fly on the wall in that situation.
A bikie, no less.
But you touched on so many things. And for me now, at 48, hitting these emotional highs and lows have been really confronting. For a couple of years, people are saying to me, you've got to go on HRT, give it a shot. And a few months ago, I did. And I've been on progesterone and testosterone, not a problem. It's been helping with some things, but the estrogen I'd tried a couple of years ago, and didn't go well for me. But I thought, no, I'll give it another go. And just to kind of echo the hormonal shifts, I took the estrogen patches, and the first couple of days I was like, okay, cool. I feel like I can run with this. And then I started to notice that I was holding my breath more. I was feeling more, my moods were feeling more exaggerated. Felt like I was being chased by a bear. There was no bear. And my son had wanted braces for ages, and we'd finally got around to saying, yes, we can afford them. Let's go for it. So it was supposed to be like a nice morning. I had a really busy day at work, sat at the doctor or the surgeon or whatever it is that you do with braces. Orthodontist, that's the one. And I could feel myself getting quite, I couldn't sort of it was a bit edgy. And I said, look, I'll go and get set up for work, and then I'll come back, and then I'll take you to your mate's house. And then I get back and I'm running late, and I'd taken something out of the car that he needed. And he goes, oh, Mum, where's my, and I literally just lost it. And if you know my son, he's the most laid back, kind, thoughtful human. And I absolutely lost it. And I got in the car, and I was like, if I'd have had a manual, it would have been screeching down the road. I was gesticulating all over the place. I won't say what I was saying. And he was just sort of like sinking into the chair. And in the end, I just slammed my foot on the brake, told him to get out of the car, and used some words that I'm not very proud of. And he was like, what, here? And I said, yes, just get out. I've had enough. And I drove off. And then it was like the dawn just settled. And this poor kid had to walk 6K home. And I phoned my husband and I said, I've royally messed things up. Like, I don't know what just happened, but you better phone Jack because I'm just about to go into an 8-hour day and I won't have any time to make this better. And do you know what that poor kid said to his dad? He goes, I'm all right. I just hope mum is.
I feel for you, and I reckon so many other women listening to this are, because we've all been there.
It was
I feel like
brutal.
the
And what
first
broke my
person.
heart the most was that when I got to my phone, he'd sent a message going, Mum, I am so sorry. And I said to him, darling, if anyone treats you like that, your apology is not necessary. It's me that needs to apologize to you. And the thing with our family is that we're really awesome at the recovery. And I think that's really important to stress to our listeners is that we are going to have these, especially in our time of life, we are going to have these emotions that come from seemingly nowhere. And we're going to have to confront them head on with courageous conversations after the math if we have been, in my case, very unacceptable behavior towards my son. But what that did was it gave me a gauge on all of the things that have been going on for me. I subsequently took the patch off and I haven't gone near a patch again. And I'm working through all the other symptoms holistically. But our hormones really do have a huge factor. So I think back 2 years ago, I would have made that mean something about my character, that I was bad mum. Wasn't able, God, what sort of coach am I if I can't even regulate myself? Who am I to be teaching this stuff if I can't even control my own emotions? But the reality is that if you've got too much estrogen in your body or you've got no estrogen and your estrogen is tanked, there are going to be moments where you are irrational, things happen, your window of tolerance reduces significantly. And we have to be able to, one, recover from that and have good conversations with the people that we've affected and be brave enough to step into that, but also treat ourselves with a massive amount of compassion and understanding that it's a difficult time of life. And I think for me and my husband, we've become so much, well, we're already close, but even closer during this challenging time because he has got the capacity to hold me to account and say that behavior is not good enough, but also hold me to account and go, but I know it's not you, you know? And so there's that level. He's keeping his boundaries. My kids are keeping their boundaries, but they also are understanding that there is a lot that's going on that is out of my control every now and then.
Yeah. And you brought up a great point about, well, I'm going to bring up the point actually, but you
Over
you
to
made
you,
me think
girl.
of it. No, about how you were saying like you went on these hormones and then your estrogen was elevated. And so that was their reaction for you. And then you did make the point because you said whether your estrogen's really high or whether it's really low, it can create different sort of reactions and responses. And that's what Ayurveda always speaks about, is that we're so individual. And that's why it's so important when we get to this phase of life. Just like we need to know what tools work for us, what nutrition works for us, what routine works for us, we need to know what works best for our hormonal profile as well. And for some people, they go on bioidentical HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy, but bioidentical one, plant-based, but it has to be prescribed by a general practitioner. And they feel 100% themselves again. Like they swear by it. It's so good. Then I've had clients and like yourself have gone on it and feel worse. So we really have to work out our own body and what it needs in this time. And through this transitional time, the biggest driver is actually the fluctuation, not just the decline. So it's that fluctuation of estrogen and progesterone. And we know that estrogen has this immense effect on the brain. It has a really strong influence on neurotransmitters like our serotonin, which is our mood stability, our dopamine, which is our motivation and reward. So a lot of people who go into this phase and then their estrogen drops and declines, who were once of those, pitta woman, very motivated, they are very progressive with their goals, all of a sudden feel unmotivated and don't want to do anything and don't know why and where it's gone. Also, another neurotransmitter is our GABA, which calms our nervous system and regulates our nervous system. So when we find these fluctuations in estrogen in perimenopause, it's very common to experience irritability, emotional like variability, increased sensitivity to stress, reduced tolerance to the people around us. So we become very frustrated. Are we having anxiety and mood swings? And this is because the brain essentially loses some of its buffering capacity. So we aren't as resilient to stress as we were in our 20s. And that's the same for progesterone decline. So whilst estrogen goes high and low and high and low, progesterone, there is fluctuations between high and low, but it's usually sort of declining more than estrogen in the initial stages. And progesterone is naturally a calming hormone. It's our body's internal anti-anxiety hormone, which when I was explaining, when I went on the oral contraceptive pill in my early 20s, it was just cut off because it stops you ovulating. And we produce progesterone from ovulating. It also enhances GABA activity in the brain, which we just spoke about. And so it really can help women to feel grounded, calm, and emotionally regulated. But as it drops, it's not unlikely that our nervous system is going to become more reactive. Our sleep worsens because it helps us sleep. We feel wired, but really tired, like really fatigued. And, just that overwhelm tolerance decreases like dramatically. And this can create a state where even minor stress that once we were like, whatever, now becomes really intolerable. Like you just explained, like your son forgetting his shirt, right? And like you said before, it's not just like that one thing. It's just this buildup of little things that we have less tolerance to before that one thing really triggers everything. And then with that, our cortisol and our nervous system becomes overloaded throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. And, it is also one of the times where life is really demanding for us, our careers, our caregiving, because not only are we caregiving for kids, some women are also now having to caregive for their parents, aging parents. There's, like you said, there can be relationship strain if there's not strong communication, because also the man feels really confused, or the partner, say you might have a woman partner, feel confused because there can be shifts in some stress resilience, in personality traits, those type of things. And there's just that years of accumulation of stress.
Yeah. And I think it boils down to one thing, it's communication, isn't it?
Mm.
If we can have these honest communication with people that we love, we can send the odd meme to our mate who just threw their kid out of a car and make a bit of a joke of it. We want to be bringing the conversation to light so that there's no shame around what's happening if it is a hormonal thing, and also educating people on how to respond and how to your point earlier, how to direct the energy in a way that is meaningful and helpful rather than destructive. And so everything comes back to how we communicate with ourselves, how we communicate with others, and the stories that we make it mean. So we diminish this shame and guilt that a lot of women feel for having it. I think the other thing that I feel really strongly about now I'm going through it is the things that used to work for me don't work for me now. And so I often would I've got sort of generally quite a lot of energy, and I'm quite an expressive person. So I would use boxing, running, anything that was really intense to be able to channel that emotion out of me. That doesn't work for me so much anymore. I don't have the capacity to do those really intense workouts. So I've had to learn different strategies to get that energy out of me. So I use breath work a lot more now. I use being in nature a lot more than, in my case, it was boxing. So that's probably worth noting. If you're in a time of your life where you're trying to do the things that you've always done, but you are feeling frustrated, and anger leads from frustration, then you might want to look into different ways of channeling that energy through. Because, what works for us in our 20s doesn't work for us in our 40s and 50s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the communication with self is so important, and being able to reframe the way that we're feeling and dealing with things. Sometimes our nervous system is helping us reframe that for ourselves. And it's just sort of saying that I can't continue abandoning myself at this level anymore.
Yeah.
And often underneath the feeling of rage, you said earlier, like, actually that's just sort of the experience that you have after a lot of suppressed and bottled emotions that didn't start with anger. So what's underneath that? Is it grief? Are you grieving, maybe your past, or are you grieving a relationship? Are you grieving a loss of career? There's so many different things. Loss of identity. Are you just in complete burnout from people pleasing for the last 20 years? Are you holding resentment towards your partner, your parents, your friends, your children? We've spoken about hormonal chaos, like, is that sort of a driving factor? And also unmet emotional needs. Has that just got to a point where you're just like, oh my God, like, I can't take this anymore? This stage of life, it can become a really profound invitation for recalibration rather than suppression if we enable that. So I think, yeah, in saying that, we've sort of covered a lot of ground here, and I hope it's resonated with women listening.
I would say if people want to explore it more, two books that I found really helpful was Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
Okay.
I listened to it probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I then went on and bought the actual hard copy to underline, because there were so many points in that was like, oh my gosh, yes, yeah. And I remember being in the shower with it on in the speaker on, and just so many points. Oh my goodness, it was just so liberating to hear thoughts that I'd had but hadn't been able to articulate in her words. And the other one, which is quite nice to explore, is The Holistic Psychologist by Dr. Nicole LePera. Those two are really helpful in terms of getting to understand the society's expectations, but also understanding our unconscious beliefs, and how we might pacify our needs to meet the needs of society and our community.
Yeah. And I mean, whilst you're mentioning books, what about mine?
Well, yours is up there, darling. I'm assuming that all of the readers have read both of our books. And
We do cover topics like this in my book, Ayurveda and the Alchemy of Her, by Dr. Harmony Robinson Stack. But Anna also has a book, whilst we're on books.
yeah, Only Human, Simple Steps to Reshape Your Life.
There you go.
But Harmony's book, I just assumed everyone's got it, darling. It's right up there in the Amazon top sellers.
Yeah, but you did jump straight into what I wanted to cover next, which was just some simple ways that women can support their feelings of rage and those type of emotions. And you've given some beautiful tools, because I always like to give some takeaways. So Anna's mentioned the book. I think number one is definitely nervous system safety, because if your nervous system is dysregulated, that is when you're going to have those hormonal shifts due to having the stress hormonal activation. You're not going to feel safe. You're not going to feel supported. You're going to start tapping into those thought loop patterns that aren't conducive to your health. So nervous system regulation is huge. And like Anna said, you might need to shift what you were doing that was once working, that's not working. So if a long run or a boxing session isn't doing it for you anymore because your nervous system is so dysregulated and less resilient, then maybe you need to start doing more walks out in nature, some breath work practices, some yoga, slowing down, putting in boundaries, doing some journaling. What we spoke about last time was connecting with female friendships and community. And that's a huge one to really help support your nervous system if you're obviously connecting with the right people. But connection is huge. Like, I know every time me and Anna connects, like, we're on a high after we speak, because we've I don't know, releasing the oxytocin, or the feel good hormones, the happy hormones, and just being able to talk out your problems or your feelings with someone who's willing to listen and to really hold space for you is so profound and so important. So for me, I think just some final reflections that I would say is that we as women, we're often carrying the emotional load of the entire household, right? And we have to look at that. We have to be really supportive of our own emotional load. We know that perimenopause removes the biological buffering that once helped us tolerate the misalignment and stress. So we need to be aware of that, but not use it as an excuse. So this is where we have to come up with a brilliant toolkit that we can use when we're feeling misaligned, when we're feeling under pressure. Yeah. And suppressed anger, it doesn't just disappear. Okay. It becomes anxiety. It can become resentment. It can further drive hormonal chaos. It can lead to burnout, and it can lead to illness. And female rage is often grief with nowhere to go. So look at those underlying causes of the quote unquote rage and do a big deep dive on that. Anna, what do you have any takeaways that you would like to share with the listeners?
Well, echoing all of what you've said, nervous system, if that is not addressed, you will continue to have dis-ease. So nervous system regulation is key. What I can be helpful is a tracker. So tracking those times when you're feeling regulated and, unicorns and rainbows, and then tracking the times where you are not feeling that the unicorns and rainbows are anywhere to be seen. And then that will give you an understanding as to whether or not it is the biomechanics of the body, the physiology of the body, or whether there are people and circumstances that are triggering those emotions. Christmas is one of the most triggering times for people. Why? Because they are around family. So you might want to look into that. And that's not to say that you stop doing those things. If you work for people and people are particularly triggering, but you don't have the ability to leave your job and be spontaneous in that way, you're going to have to learn, okay, well, actually, I've noticed when Simon walks into the room, I hold my breath and I clench my fists. Okay, that's a sign that Simon might be reasonably triggering to you. So that's your opportunity to not change Simon, but to actually do your work so that you can show up to that situation feeling empowered rather than disconnected. So tracking is super, super powerful. Power of the breath, to change your physiology in a couple of minutes of breathing is probably the most powerful thing that you can do. And then just be courageous enough to have conversations with people that you trust, that might be going through similar things, so that again, we're not adding layers of shame or guilt. We're normalizing the conversation. And probably one of the biggest things is our language. Like, how are we talking to ourselves? I mean, I'll say to myself, "Oh, I'm being a psycho." Not that helpful, And so you listen to the way that you're speaking to yourself. Listen to the way that you perceive um, other people when they are in rage. And that will give you a bit of an indicator as to how comfortable you feel with those. Your dog's feeling rage right now, aren't they? I can hear them.
Yes.
So yeah, so there we go. That's listen to the language. The unconscious conditioning that we have is expressed in our language. It's the quickest way to work out where we sit.
Absolutely. And on that language and tracking yourself, we've used the word rage pretty much as a blanket term, just to feel that that inner fire, that combustion, that discomfort within ourselves. And for all of my ladies, all the men, if they're listening, who love sort of the Ayurvedic perspective, I just want to remind you, as we are all individual, that blanket term of rage can show up and look different for all of us. So if you have more of a vata aggravation, that's going to create nervous system irritability in you. So that sort of quote unquote rage will do that. So it may present more as anxiety, overwhelm, insomnia. Whereas if you've got a pitta aggravation, then it's going to create that heat, that irritability, that sort of, I guess, typical perception of what we think anger or rage looks like, that frustration, criticism, and intensity. Whereas a kapha rage, they could be sort of raging inside, and what they will do is they will start to feel really heavy and bogged down with everything, and maybe they will be suppressing it. to the point where they start to turn a cold shoulder, or they become very attached and overcompensate their rage with neediness, or become very attached to possessions, or very stubborn and stale and don't want to, don't sort of want to solve the issue because they're becoming so stubborn and set in their way. So we have to look at this sort of rage as not just being like this pitta imbalance. It can present differently for different people. And that's where that getting to know yourself, tracking and understanding what the way in which you're speaking to yourself and the way your body's responding will help you with the tools that you need to support your nervous system. In saying that, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. If you would like to learn more about Ayurveda, come and check out our academy, Ayurveda Alchemist Academy. No, it isn't. It's just ayurvedaalchemist.com.au. But if you look up Ayurveda Alchemist Academy, that is where you'll go. We've actually got an intro course now, which is just a self-led paced intro course into Ayurveda. So if it's something that you're just dipping your toes in, that's a really good place to start. And like I mentioned before, if you love getting into these topics, understanding yourself, go grab a copy of my book if you haven't already, Ayurveda and the Alchemy of Her. And Anna, over to you.
Human. Yeah, you can find both books on Amazon, and you can dive in. But Harmony's read is off the charts.
And yours. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, beautiful people. Next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.